Hello everyone, this interview is part of a series of videos for the Startup Guide 2024 by Dubai Chamber of Digital Economy. Hello Nader, nice to have you. So you're the Managing Director of Dubai Future District Fund, so thank you for taking the time. Can you tell us a bit about yourself and how did you ended up in DFDF?
So the background to my story is maybe two different tracks that I like to talk about. One is my corporate track and one's my startup track. So I've been involved with a multitude of startups from different sectors, a couple of exits, a couple of learning opportunities. And I've always been very excited about the sector overall, whether as a builder myself or more recently on the investment side. On the corporate side, I've done everything from banking to partnerships to setting up data and analytics businesses as an entrepreneur, setting up other businesses from within large corporates. And more recently, as part of a government think and do tank, thought about different initiatives to work on, and one of them happened to be the Dubai Future District Fund. So in terms of realizing its strategy, aligning its strategy with key stakeholders, and ultimately being part of the investment committee up to my joining in August of last year, a big chunk of where it all came from was that energy and that drive to build and support builders, but also seeing the government, the corporate side of things and what they're looking for in terms of innovation, incorporation of tech, and how we can sort of break these barriers of enterprise to startup sort of incorporation. It's been a big driver of why I've joined in the venture capital space.
Interesting. Yeah, going from corporate to startup and then VC is always a nice journey, I find. Absolutely. At least personally. So if you had to give a 30-second elevator pitch on what makes Dubai the right place for a startup to establish itself, what would those bullet points be?
So at a very high level, the first thing that comes up to anyone's mind is the quality of life here. Safe. Not a lot of places in the world can say that today. Yeah. And number two is amenities, some of the best restaurants, beaches, and the list goes on. That drive of opportunities and things to do. The diversity of talent, we literally have every nationality in the world represented here. So the thoughts, the ideas, the experiences that they bring that enrich anything that they're building together is priceless. But then beyond that is the strategic location. If you're an entity or you're a startup, you want to have the best talent from everywhere in the world. One is to attract them, but one is to manage them. So if they're in different time zones, it helps to be quite central. Yeah. If you want to be connected and seeing your operations in different parts of the world, you want that connectivity. Dubai offers that all in one place. So if I think about the two core elements, it's that. But if I go beyond that, the friendliness of the business environment over here from a policy perspective, regulatory perspective, all of these aspects play a lot into why do you start here and why Dubai?
What has Dubai done right to attract the startup investor ecosystem here, whether local, regional, or international? What makes Dubai such a hotspot in the region, the wider region, GCC or even MENA?
So a couple of things come to my mind when you ask that question. Number one is overall long term, there are innovation policies and sort of visions to growing the digital agenda. And this is very clear with the fact that we have a digital economy minister. Number two, we have a chamber of commerce that has a specific digital economy arm to it and a focus to it. So it's beautiful to see that intention is not just its talk, it's actually done. There are institutions that have KPIs to drive this agenda forward. So that's number one. Yeah. Number two is around overall the policies and the friendliness towards innovation, intellectual property, entrepreneurship. You're seeing policy reform constantly to make sure that it's attractive and that it's enabling for this to overall thrive. You're seeing that in sandbox projects that are being set up. You're seeing that in IP protection movements, whether on the ground here or reciprocation in different parts of the world through negotiating with counterparties and making sure that there's more jurisdictional adherence to some of the IP that's created out of here. So there's a lot of what's happening on a fundamental government level. But then on the other side, there's funding and a good level of funding to enable projects and good projects to thrive. So if you've got the right elements of the right team, the right intentions, and the right sort of vision and direction, everything around you is there to support you and grow.
Yeah. You talk about the regulatory frameworks, for example. Have you seen the government working closely with VCs and startups, getting feedback on things that work and things that don't work? Are they open to hearing feedback and then, changing some laws or putting in place some regulatory frameworks that would be an added value for the ecosystem as a whole?
Yours truly, the Dubai Future District Fund, was created with exactly that problem statement to solve for. So we are government money. We are there to sort of bridge that communication. Number one is we work and invest in the private sector. So this is both into funds, so the incumbent venture capital industry, but also into startups. And the idea there is, what are we getting in terms of pulses and these engagements of being part of the ecosystem that we can amplify and take up to policymakers, to regulators, to make sure that everything that's there is enabling the right kind of innovation, but with this government hat of consumers are not being put into the tough situation. So doing it in a way where it's pro-business, but not at the cost of the consumer. And that's where we stand, in that interesting sort of in-between, where we're wearing that government hat, but we also have returns elements to think about as an investor.
Yeah. So you remain a key enabler in those discussions.
Absolutely, because if I was to jump into the why, our portfolio is not just the portfolio of the startups we invest in. Our portfolio is the portfolio of all the funds we invest in as well. Mm-hmm. So if I jump into that point, is if there is a bottleneck in setting up a certain sectoral type of startup, and we hear it from 20 startups based on all the funds we're invested in, and we take it up, it's a much bigger problem to say, policymaker, listen to us, this is a big problem, than if each individual went up one by one and knocked on that door. Yeah. So we come with that amplification element of, here are a number of problems, and we have a vested interest as a government player, as well as the private sector in all of this. Let's all work together to solve for it.
Since 2017, Dubai startups have attracted most of the funding, 95+% of the funding in the UAE. Mostly, one of the good reasons is because most of the startups are concentrated in Dubai. According to you, what has Dubai done right in comparison to not only the other Emirates, but like the wider region?
So on a regional perspective, what Dubai does really well is you have a region that has a lot of talent, has a lot of opportunity, has large populations, has a lot of room to also grow in terms of innovation agenda, in terms of catching up with what companies in the US are doing, different parts of the world are doing. So there's a demand side and there's a supply side of a lot of opportunities, brains, hunger to build stuff. But then on the other side, there's a lot of room to create efficiencies and creating the opportunities to uplift sort of the wider ecosystem. And what Dubai does really well is it brings everyone together in one living space, in a place where everyone's welcome, in a visa regime model that allows you to bring more and more. And the reason I bring this specific example up around visas, we've talked to companies, for example, from the States. There was one company I was talking to recently. They're a massive gaming platform, for example. They create all kinds of big labels. And their biggest issue is, for talent in that sector, they need to bring people from all over the world. But the ability to attract them to the US is, there's no guarantee on they get the visas. When they do, they might not extend it. Number three, they have to pay a massive increment because there's taxation on top of that. There's the cost of living on top of that, depending on where you're based. If you're in LA or San Francisco or New York, you have to price that into the package. Yeah. Now, living in Dubai, you're not paying the income taxes as an employer. You're not worried about the extension of the visas because you have green visas, golden visas, and the list goes on to attract talent. And these last 10 years, right? So you know you have that talent, you know you're investing your efforts into developing that talent, and that talent's going to remain there. So the return of on investment, on the talent, and the ability to then plan out your business going forward goes a long way to be here. Apart from that, it's the connectivity, again, the quality of life, the diversity of everyone being here. Everyone's welcome, no matter what background you are.
Yeah.
You'll find a community here. If you want to stick to your own, you want to engage with others, that's the beauty of it. I'll sit at the lunch table over here in Dubai, 10 people, 10 different stories of how they got here. Yeah. That's beautiful. You don't get that everywhere in the world, and that's what makes it an amazing place to, on a creativity perspective, generating ideas, learning from everyone's experiences, and then putting that into practice.
Yeah, it's not rare to have a multicultural setup when you lunch, dinner, events. So many, like 100 plus different nationalities, and it's very interesting.
And on the other side, as a builder, now you want to test your products out. You can test with all these consumers in mind,
different countries.
With the right spending powers. Instead of going to all these countries and dealing with the go-to-market of legal, marketing, all of these things to set up your business, or even testing in that market, you can do it over here.
True.
So it's a great way to test, try, and develop.
Yeah, no, Dubai is great for that. How does the Dubai startup ecosystem support founders, entrepreneurs, and startups specifically? Any programs, initiatives, or resources that are made available to startups to help them? Can you list a few of them?
Sure, I'll start with the listing. I'll give a few examples and then what that means in the grand scheme of things. So from everything from where we're sat today, from the DIFC Innovation Hub to the Dubai Future Accelerators, In5, DTech, Chambers Startup Hub, and this is all on the government perspective. On the private sector perspective, you have Astro Labs, for example, and other initiatives as well. And the idea there is they provide a plethora of things that startups are looking for. Everything from co-working spaces, events, which is basically not just a networking opportunity, but also a feeling of creating a community and people. I mean, being in the startup ecosystem and being a startup founder, you're constantly going through ups and downs, things working out, things not working out, negotiating a contract for 6 months only to realize that you're not going to win that contract. So having this sense of community is a big one. Stakeholder connectivity. So some of these accelerator programs put you in touch with the right stakeholder on the other side, whereas it would take you almost forever to reach some of these people and large operators, for example. So they not only speed up the process, but get you to the right person. But by going through their program as well, it's almost validation for that operator that this one's already gone through a due diligence process, that there's some validation on what they're doing, and others have seen it as well. Other things around soft landing, for example, with what the Chambers is doing in terms of everything that you need to know to get started over here, what DET is doing in terms of giving you some of the services to move your family, for example, government grants, the mentorship that they give, access to funding through ourselves that are quite involved with the overall ecosystem, whether they're incubators, accelerators, and beyond. The idea is that we as collectively provide what they're looking for, and we're always there to listen to see what new opportunities there are to support the wider ecosystem.
While we were doing some of the updates for the Startup Guide 2024 for the Dubai Chamber, there was it seems like there's more and more of those accelerators and incubators, private ones, that are specific to certain industry, such as crypto, Web3. There's a lot of those that have come up. Based on your experience, is that something that, are you working closely with those like private incubators that are very focused on certain verticals, certain industries?
I think there's two things to look at here, and it really comes down to why do they exist, right? So in some cases it's to bring the government and the large operators closer to innovation, so they can be a big opportunity for the startup, but at the same time they would gain from the efficiencies of bringing that. So bringing that innovation in. So there's an opportunity around having it sectorally, having it by entity. And some of these incubators do it by technology stacks, for example. And it really comes down to what is it that they're trying to solve for. Is it heavily regulated as a sector? So being close to the regulators makes a lot of sense. Being close to policymakers might make a lot of sense. If it's a developing sector, do they need access to talent, to capital, to a space where they can create a community? So it really comes down to what they're trying to solve, and we're here across the board trying to support it at large. So whether it's private, government, the idea is we're here as an enabler from the government's perspective of trying to enhance the startup ecosystem as a whole.
So Dubai has set its sight on becoming a digital economy capital of the world, and this within the next 10 years. It has opened its borders. We talked about the numerous visa options that they offer at the various initiatives to attract advanced technology companies and talent to set up in Dubai. Why is, according to you, ease of access, ease of doing business, fundraising, attracting tech talent so important for Dubai to achieve that goal of being a capital of the world within the next 10 years?
I think one thing that Dubai does really well, and if you look across the board, and we were chatting about this briefly earlier, is the whole world is looking inwards. They're looking at how they push the agenda, protect the incumbents in their home countries, in their home cities, in their home states. But what Dubai is doing exactly the opposite way around is it's looking to the world. It's looking to the world to say, if you have a great idea, we're here. If you add a lot of value to the world and you don't have a home, we're here. Dubai is being a beacon for the world on a globalization perspective, and it's doing a phenomenal job. The reason everyone's talking about Dubai today, in my perspective, everywhere I go, they're like, oh, Dubai, we want to move there. There was a recent study done by one of the funds we're involved in alongside Google on intent of people and where they're looking to move. Yeah. And across the globe, we saw this map and colors, but there was one very clear color across the entire map. And it was very obvious that Dubai was on top of people's minds from everywhere from the US to Australia. And the reason for that is it's just open for everyone. That intent is a great opportunity window as an employer, because that means you have access to the right talent, because everyone wants to come here. If that's the case, then you can pick and choose who you want to hire, because you now have the best that are looking to come here. Yeah. When it comes to capital, when you have this attractivity, this openness, there's also a reciprocation of this openness to other countries to say, you know what, you were open to talent attraction of our people, our businesses, we're also open to yours. This reciprocation has been happening at the Ministry of Foreign Affairs quite a bit, and we're seeing comprehensive trade agreements being signed off with a lot of major markets throughout the world, which enables the business side of things not just to cater to the local market here, but beyond it as well, but to be anchored over here to serve the world. So talent, business opportunity, and the government that's there willing to listen, access to them. There are a lot of reasons why Dubai is doing what it's doing, and it's all about listening, enabling, whereas the world is looking to close, and it's a beautiful place to be right now in terms of opportunities.
I was looking at, not long ago, we were looking at the number of European patent applications from the Middle East, and like numbers were going through the roof to secure patent within Europe, and I think it's European patent in ICT, I think was the, and as you said, like it seems like they're also opening up to European market and international market, and we see more and more startups.
Well, that serves two things, the point you're bringing up there. Number one is you're seeing innovation happen here and that they're filing cross-border. Yeah. But the second thing that's interesting about what you mentioned there is that they're thinking beyond the region as well in terms of growth. Yeah. If you looked, and maybe I'm touching up on one of the future questions that we have, but if I look at the startup landscape from when I had my first tech startup in 2011 versus where we are today, the narrative was always, here are the Arabic-speaking countries of the world, and we want to target them because we think that there's a lot of overlap in terms of costs of marketing, in terms of legal, in terms of consumer behaviors that we can leverage. Yeah. But now you're seeing a completely different narrative where we're not just innovating for a region, we're innovating for almost the world, right? And with what you're saying, they are going global with their solutions.
Yeah, more and more, for sure. Are there startups in your portfolio that have gained advantage from the infrastructure and support system provided by Dubai? Do you have any specific example of success stories in your portfolio? And the things that they gain from setting up here versus another place?
Absolutely, and maybe I can also give one example of a global player that started here as well. But a couple that come to mind from our portfolio, one is Hollow, for example. And Hollow is this intersection between property technologies and financial technologies. And what's interesting about them is they provide a solution for the real estate market and the boom that's happening over here. I mean, they're leveraging the fact that that's happening in the marketplace. So yes, we have a market that's massive in the property sector. And yeah, I mean, just being in that sector over here is large enough for you not to having, you wouldn't have to go beyond the Dubai market to have a large enough market. So that's number one.
Yes.
So they're picking up off of the size of the market in Dubai. Number two is a company that actually, I ran into the founder who's sitting there just outside. Cam.ai leveraged the Dubai Center for AI's inaugural AI program, and that gave them access to a wide plethora of potential partners, stakeholders in the ecosystem, but also getting extremely close to a couple of things. Number one is the regulators and policymakers to see the level of innovation that's happening on the ground here. But then also talking to people that in the AI sector would be potential partners to enable them to have access to infrastructure. And that's one of the biggest problem statements that people have in that space is how do I get access to quality GPUs, compute power?
Yes.
Programs like that have enabled the access, both on an infrastructure perspective, but also on a business development perspective. But then taking a step back, also the mentorship and the validation of direction and where they're heading. On a sort of a step back outside of our portfolio, there are great success stories that have leveraged the infrastructure that Dubai has. And one great example is Katopi, where they've leveraged the fact that looking around Dubai and being a logistical hub, the infrastructure that comes with it, it's almost inevitable that something as beautiful a story as Katopi would come out of the Dubai ecosystem. So that's just another one in terms of how you got cloud kitchens and now the other business lines that they've gone into started with the fact that you had an infrastructural advantage of being in that business line and starting in Dubai.
How have you seen Dubai's funding environment change in the last 10 years? And what has surprised or impressed you the most as Dubai is developing into a leading digital economy and an entrepreneurial-focused city?
Maybe I'll jump into a personal story here. I mean, the first tech startup I was involved in was in 2011. And looking around then versus now, one of the biggest surprises is, the choice of capital providers that you have. Back then, there was less than a handful of choices that you had to go and fundraise from. Why does that matter? Not everyone has the same sort of thesis on where the world's heading. Yeah. So if you go to 2-3 doors and they all say, we don't believe in your idea, it doesn't mean that it's a bad idea, but now you have someone else that might say, you know what, I believe in what you're doing. Yeah. And the fact that there's that much more funding. I mean, MENA in 2021 had over $1 billion deployed into it, and a lot of that comes into Dubai. So the amount of funding is the first fundamental surprise of where I was in 2011 versus where we are today. Number two is the number of startups. This year, we hit over 4,000 startups in just this ecosystem in Dubai. So why does that matter? Where there is volume, there is demand on an investment perspective, other services perspectives, other financing tools perspectives, and the more that there are, the more support that comes in. So that's number one. And number two is the best partner, the best consumer, the best validator of your business is another business owner. And you get a lot closer as part of these communities, as part of these co-working spaces, incubator programs, accelerator programs, that you work very closely with one another, where you share ideas, best practices, what worked, what didn't work. And that community part and the growing community part is the second part of, it's a beautiful story to seeing where we were versus where we are today with all these opportunities for support. And that's what brings me to the last part, is we've seen that. We've seen the number of incubators rise, we've seen the number of accelerators rise, we've seen a government taking an active part in this whole story. And on top of all of this is the layer of, there's this global attractivity. If you look at the numbers in Dubai, the vast majority of dollars coming into the VC industry is from outside of Dubai. When it comes to startups, they're moving here. And that attractivity of coming here, setting up here, building here, is beautiful. It wasn't the story many years ago, but it is the story today. It's where people come, it's where people start, it's where the dollars are, and it's where opportunities to build solutions are for people from outside of the region to look forward to, and to leverage this platform of legal framework where we use common law, political stability, accessibility, connectivity, access to government. So it's a beautiful place to be, and having been through it in 2011 up to about 2014-15 with that startup, to seeing it where it is today, it's almost lifetimes worth of work that's happened in that period of time.
Yeah, I can imagine how quickly things have moved here over the past 10 years. What does the future hold for the Dubai startup ecosystem? How can it improve, or what do you see it working on? And I think it goes back to what I asked earlier around, how open policymakers and government is, open to suggestions from yourself, from startups. So how do you see that playing out over the next few years for Dubai?
So I think it goes back to where the baseline is, and the baseline is a very good place. Where we are today at present is a good indicator of where we're heading, the trajectory, and you can see that trajectory in terms of talent that's coming in, that's building the future of the world, of innovation, of this ecosystem. Number two, you're seeing intent from the government to enable all of that. Policy perspective, regulatory perspective. They're listening, they're creating regulatory sandboxes to seed innovation and see how they can protect consumers at the same time by understanding the innovation. Policymakers to make sure that the capital, the talent, the protection on an IP perspective is there. Number three, it's making sure that the capital environment is healthy and is abundant enough for enabling this overall vision of 2031 of developing the digital economy in Dubai. So I think overall, the fact that there's this cohesive movement towards developing it, and you can see this trajectory is very promising, I think, on a future perspective. It's looking up from a very good base of, if we look back versus where we are today, I think it's a good indicator of where we're heading.
Do you think we have all the ingredients in place to successfully develop 20 unicorns by 2031?
I don't think it's far-fetched at all. I think what comes to my mind is what we've developed right now in terms of platform is it's attractive. People are coming here, they're developing here, they're growing here. I think the other side of the coin is how well do we start creating these corridors, which are already in effect. We've seen unicorns come out of the ecosystem here, but developing even more of these corridors to Europe, to East Asia, to the Americas, and to South Asia, and the list goes on, to making sure that there's access and the availability of expertise to help you get out across there, whether it's through platforms such as ourselves, whether it's through platforms through the chambers, or beyond that. The fact that there's a support mechanism of how to do it. We've done it before. These are the things you shouldn't be doing to save time, which is the most valuable resources of developing a startup, or especially in the tech space where time is of the essence. I think it goes a long way in terms of where it's going and our ability to hit that number. I think it's a very doable one with the trajectory we're going in terms of the chamber setting up offices all over the world, the Ministry of Foreign Affairs enabling trade and intellectual properties to go over. And this is a very fundamental point. The Ministry of Foreign Affairs has a tech diplomacy arm, which is a big part of this whole enablement story that I'm talking about. So it's not purely physical trade that they're negotiating, but they're also talking about services, technology transfer, and the ability to negotiate on those terms to make sure that what we're building here can be sold in those markets and vice versa. So that openness and that ability to grow is a big fundamental part to bring us back to the point.
But it'd be very interesting to see unicorns, startups as a whole, like growing, maturing, and reaching that unicorn status. That'd be very exciting to see. Can you tell us what sets DFDF apart in your vision, your mission, the structure, and your current focus?
So as a government-backed fund, I think it's very important that I share this. Our mission is to align with Dubai's vision at the end of the day. We're here to enable that vision of becoming a global hub for innovation and technology specifically, right? So that idea of how do we develop this digital economy, we're a fundamental part of understanding and driving that on a funding perspective. But also listening to the bottlenecks and feeding it back, like I said earlier. So we sit at this intersection between government and the private sector. What we're trying to build a bigger and bigger part of in terms of focusing on investing in funds, but also directly into whether it's AI companies, health tech companies, prop tech companies, climate and other sectors is we're trying to fuel the next generation of growth in Dubai strategically by aligning with fiscal policy measures, the overall vision of where growth is going to come from in Dubai, and enabling that through technologies. So I think we're a big part of the digital ambitions of Dubai, and we're also here to listen and be a pulse on what's going on around us. So my main mission is not just to enable, but to hear. And we're basically a sponge on behalf of the government to amalgamate all the voices that the sector has.
Very good. Thank you very much, Nader.
Thank you.
It was nice having you.
Likewise. Thank you, Pierre.
Yeah, no, thank you.
If you enjoyed this content, continue listening or watching to future episodes where we speak to many of Dubai's startup founders, investors, and digital economy and startup ecosystem enablers. Also, the Dubai Chamber of Digital Economy has published an annual startup guide to help answer any questions you may have on how to register and start a company in Dubai. Download the guide now at the Dubai Chamber of Digital Economy website.